So yeah, this is what we do here. If you're new here, you came in with a raid, or you're just like stopping by, we read philosophy and we discuss it, and we try to figure out what the point is here. Like, is there anything worthwhile? Like, why did they bother writing this paper? Ugh, philosophy. So why'd they do this? So this is Pain Representational by Murat, Aydede, and this is in the forthcoming in the Belgrade Philosophical Annual. It looks like a special issue honoring Nikola Grahek. Sorry how I say all except for very boring English. I don't know how to pronounce things. So yeah, this is I think a issue on pain. And here we go. And at the end of the paper, we get to rate it, and we read it. We try to figure out if it was worth anything, and we have a rating system, and that'll hopefully go up soon because I've got a little bit more free time now if my work doesn't drive me insane. But yeah, as always, it's my first time reading it. Feel free to ask questions, and we'll try to explain it as we go. So here we are. Is pain representational? Representationalism in philosophy of perception has become more or less the dominant view. There are various versions of it, not all of which are motivated by the same set of concerns. Different metaphysical and epistemological agendas are at work in different strands of the movement. In this paper, I will focus on what has come to be known as strong representationalism. And we were talking about linguistic representationalism earlier with Luke, I think, posted a link that some researchers at MIT says what we say actually does not correlate to what we're thinking. Like, it correlates to something else. So, like, what is being represented in our thought? Like, this is a contemporary topic. This view has reductive and non-reductive versions, which are usually paired with realist and irrealist, not anti-realist, irrealist versions respectively. Here first, I will develop a simple, largely empirical argument against realist reductive version. Later, rather more briefly, I will extend the argument to cover irrealist representationalism. Sorry, that may have been the abstract, but didn't say that. The main tenet of strong representationalism is the phenomenal character of any conscious sensory affective experience is metaphysically determined solely by what is represented by that experience, its representational content. Okay, so so what it is. So whatever the character of a consciousness is its representational content. That's what this strong representationalism is. This view implies that there is no sensory affective experience that is not representational in this way. No qualia. More precisely, it implies that there's no phenomenal aspect of an experience that cannot be reduced back to something that the experience represents. Again, so there is no consciousness over and above the representation in the brain. Strong representationalism thus becomes a metaphysical program when it's combined with a research program that seeks to explain the facts that determine how any experience can have representational content in completely naturalistic terms, that is, when combined with a naturalistic account of experiential representation. The goal and the promise of the reductive strong representationalism is the complete naturalistic, physicalistically kosher, that's a great term, physicalistically kosher, explanation of experiential consciousness. Reductive representationalists also tend to be realist about the sensible properties that are non-conceptually represented by sensory affective experiences. This paper has wide margins, Luke says. You should zoom in, magnify just a little bit to reduce the margins if I can. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. See if I can, there we go. Good point, can get in a little bit closer. Okay. Reductive representationalists also tend to be realist about the sensible properties that are non-conceptually represented by sensory affective experiences. These sensible properties may be complex or gerrymandered or even relational, but they are physical properties in good standing whose instances exist independently of any sensing representing mind. Yeah, so this is like just a hardcore physicalistic take. What's in the world is how we what gets represented in our head. So what's in our head is a representation of what's in the world. Strong representationalism also implies a strong transparency thesis about experiences. Any aspect of an experience that is phenomenally accessible to the experiencer is an aspect of the content of that experience, an aspect of what is represented, not an aspect of the experience qua representor. Yeah, so again, I'm not making anything up. The world is just what's represented in my head. It's not like I am creating the reality. There's nothing of me in my representation. It's just, this is how our sensory organs work. We are just getting stuff in from the world, and that is just what is represented in our head. I'm not doing work on the world to like, come up with some sort of story that I tell myself. There is no story. That's what they mean by transparent here. I'm not making up a story. It's just a representation. That's how the organs work. Okay, so it's very sort of sciencey, sort of like straightforward sciencey. Realist representation. Remember, they said they're going to argue against this. So, I believe that reductive realist strong representationalism is false. Like I just said, this is what they argue against, on the grounds that there are sensory affective experiences such as sensory pains, itches, tickles, orgasms, most sensory pleasures, and many more unnamed sensations and bodily feelings that are not strongly representational in the way required by the view. Here is the UR argument for this claim. For every sensory modality or submodality M that gives rise to conscious experience E in that modality, there is a set of low-level sensible properties SP associated with M such that E represents SP, the properties, only if E is the immediate epistemic basis for the acquisition and deployment of the proprietary concepts of SP. Yeah, so basically, you have something in the world, you have a concept, and in like the low-level thing, it just has to be that sort of representation. Like, so there's like all those letters just means representation of thing in the world. That's it. C is a proprietary concept of SP, if and only if, and that's the SP is the property. C is needed for the explanation of how the agent G, where the C belongs to G set of mental representations, discriminates or learns to discriminate in SP. So yeah, there's some sort of concept that like discriminates. C is normally acquired from sensory experience in E and M. And C has labeling uses in that they are non-inferentially, directly, immediately applied to by G, the person, to the instances of the properties on the basis of the experience, thus generating true or false de re thoughts, non-inferentially based on veridical or non-veridical sensory episodes. So as we were saying before, you see a tower, you have the experience of the tower, you have the concept of tower in your head, and on the basis of that experience, you get tower in your head. Anne, what's up, lovely? How are you? Welcome in. I hope you've been well. Okay, so yeah. So basically, this is just direct representationalism with whatever it is. Like, you're just getting whatever is in the world into your head, and they're just labeling all the stuff here. That's all this is. It's a labeling exercise. Okay, so this is the continuing the definition. None of the candidate proprietary concepts for sensory pain, itch, tickle, orgasm experiences have labeling uses. Okay, so you don't label us. De re means, oh, that's a good point. De re means of the object. So when you are talking about the world, you're talking about the thing in the world, not your name of it. So the canonical example is like Superman. He is also Clark Kent. Sorry about spoilers. So you might have some ideas about Clark Kent, like he's, weak, not very strong. And then you have some ideas about Superman. He is strong and can fly. Clark Kent can't fly. Superman can fly. So the two names are sort of, they have different properties associated with them, but there's one object. The de re is the object. The underlying object can be both Clark Kent and can be Superman and has all the properties that can do both of them, but the names Clark Kent and Superman have different properties associated with them. So when you're talking de re, you're talking about the underlying worldly object, not how we think of it. So the difference between de re, it's usually called de dicto, what we say of something, what we think about it, is not necessarily the case about what the object actually is. That's de re. Eating some pepperoni pizza, oh, that sounds good. So that's de re. So you're talking about the worldly object, not just what we think of it. Okay. So there are no proprietary concepts for these experiences because you're not getting, I don't know, this is what their argument is. Okay, so thus these experiences do not represent any, this is SP is sensible properties. You have no sensible properties. You're not experiencing anything in the world. With nociceptive modality and other relevant sensory modalities or submodalities. So like the fact that like a sensory pain, so you have a pain, what are you experiencing in the world of a pain? The pain exists, they're saying, in your head, not in the world. So yeah. So reductive real strong representationalism is false because they're saying that like for a pain, itch, tickle, or orgasm, there's nothing in the world that you are experiencing. It's all internal. Okay, for convenience, the author will focus on pain experience in what follows. On premise one, so this is their argument, and now they're going to argue for their argument that since there are no sensory experiences, the strong representationalism is false. All right, on premise one, I will take the definition to be stipulative and well-motivated, theoretically as well as empirically. Even though it refers to concepts as mental representations in the psychologist's preferred case, it can be seen as highlighting the essential role of successful or unsuccessful discriminatory response in the acquisition of any intentional content of sensory perception, whether that response is cognitive or behavioral. So yeah, and what was one? Let's recall. One is that, you're getting these concepts in from the experiences. That's it. The full defense of premise one is beyond the scope of this paper, which requires going over certain areas of perceptual psychology and perceptual learning theory, as well as theories of psychosemantics. So the author is just assuming, I guess, that we get concepts. Okay. But the basic idea is that if it is not a mystery for sensory experiences to have representational content, what content an experience has or can have must be, to a large extent, a matter of what information can be extracted from the experience in the service of various cognitive and behavioral tasks downstream of the experience. Capacity for selective response to the informational content of an experience is therefore a necessary condition for that experience having or acquiring particular representational content. This capacity is a cognitive capacity in the broad sense, and I don't see any harm in characterizing it as conceptual capacity. Without such a minimal requirement as expressed by one on the representation of, again, SP, I keep forgetting what this is. What is SP? The propriety concept, sensible properties that you get, concepts associated with your sensible properties, things you are sensing. It is extremely difficult to see how reductive representationalists can hope to avoid making representational content of an experience a mystery. Yeah. So basically, you have to have concepts that you're getting from the world. That's it. There is also a general and quite an interesting issue about whether a more general version of premise 1 and the accompanying definition can plausibly be formulated to cover concepts that express low-level properties that can legitimately enter into the content of experiences. By stipulation, I will take that the sensible properties in 1 to be the lowest level properties, roughly extinction with so-called traditional secondary qualities realistically interpreted, and remain agnostic whether SP can be extended to less low-level properties, such as being a cube or even a pine tree. Yeah. So we're just assuming that you get something from the world. We're going to call these the sensible properties, and they have their concepts. We're just calling it that. On premise 2. It is clear that the crux of defending this argument against reductive representationalists lies in defending premise 2. But luckily this premise is an empirical one, so settling it doesn't require a lot of fancy philosophical footwork. But it requires some clarification. What are the candidate proprietary concepts for pain experiences? What are the proprietary concepts in the case of color vision of a normally sighted person? These are more or less definite concepts that the person can non-inferentially apply to surfaces, volume, etc., while seeing them like the concepts red, crimson red, dark crimson red, that red as demonstrated, etc., attributing the relevant, more or less specific sensible color properties. Okay. Similarly, the gustatory modality produces various more or less definite proprietary concepts that a taster can directly apply while tasting food items like sweet, salty, bitter, etc. These would be used to attribute various sensible properties to these food items. Yeah, so basically, they're saying, look, you have to have these concepts. And they have to be special. So like if you see something like this is like my orange pencil, you get the concept of like, this orange, like whatever, like they said that red, this is orange. Like, okay, like pencil, orange pencil, okay? That's a proprietary concept for this sensory experience. You're looking at an image that has orange on it. So, like that's what you got. So that's like that orange there. So you get that by looking at it. Okay, in the case of pain modality, nociception, I don't know what nociception is. I have to look this up. Sorry. What is nociception? Nociception. Sequence of biological and neurological process allowing perception of noxious stimuli. Oh, okay. So this is like a painful, like stink, like something stinks. So you have like a painful smell or something. Oops, wrong button. There we go. So yeah, so if you got pain or nociception, so you're the experience of pain. The candidate proprietary concepts can be grouped under the quasi-technical term painy as follows. My toe is painy now, if and only if my toe hurts, or I have a pain in my toe, or there's a pain in my toe now. I like this person. I mean, the idea we're going to call like a pain painy is, I like that. Author treats A through C to be roughly philosophically equivalent. A pain in my toe, then, is the instantiation of a property in my toe or condition of my toe, the property of being painy. Hence, the candidate proprietary concept for nociception is painy if we want to make pain modality parallel to other modalities. Yeah, so like you saw orange before, you were in the orange viewing modality, and now if you have a pain, you're in the pain, you're painy because you are in the pain viewing modality. Having clarified the second premise thus, we can still be somewhat relaxed about the proper expression of these concepts in language by denoting them by hurts, painful, aches, pains, etc., depending on the context. The point is that despite the idiosyncrasies of natural languages, the canonical form of locating pain in the body parts is purportedly a way of sensing the instantiation of a sensible property in that part or some condition of that body part, and a first-person non-inferential application of the relevant proprietary concepts on the basis of nociceptive experience is supposed to detect and identify that property or condition for downstream processing. Yeah, so if you got a pain in your hand is painy, and then you think about the representation that there is something wrong with my hand, that's a representation of the paininess. We can now work on the special case of premise 2. 2 prime. Painy does not have any labeling uses. This is a slightly fancy way of making the empirical claim that when people identify pains in their body parts, they don't ipso facto identify a sensible property or condition of those parts. So they're saying, look, if your hand is in pain, there is no property of your hand that's actually in pain. It's in your head. It's not in your hand. So there is nothing, there's no property of your hand that's in pain. You are in pain. Your hand might be injured, but your hand is not in pain. How would your hand be in pain? MDD. What's up, MDD? In medicine, nociceptive pain is usually contrasted with neuropathic pain. Nociceptive pain is in response to external stimulus, whether physical, chemical, etc., whereas neuropathic pain is due to damage of the nervous system itself. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. That's a good clarificatory statement because we're trying to find out where the source of the pain is. And so, like, where you thought your hand might be injured and that's the source of the pain, what is being labeled by the pain? It's not the pain. Your hand injury is, but that's not the pain. So that's what they're talking about. There is no condition of the hand being in pain. You are in pain, but the hand might be injured, but that's not the pain. Okay, author says, if we interpret sensible property as some objective, real property or condition of body parts, like some kind of tissue disturbance, that's what I was saying, like an injury, 2 prime is an empirical claim, and the evidence for it is decisive. The standard way to test claims like this is to collect evidence on the basis of how people make pain attributes to body parts. To simplify things, consider John who, after coming home from a long morning run, starts feeling pain in his toe and sincerely makes the following claim. L. I have a pain in my toe. According to our framework, John has just expressed his thought, judgment, whose content is T. My toe is painy. If the concept painy had labeling uses and thus were a proprietary concept for nociception, John's thought would be true or false according to whether or not John's toe had some kind of physical disturbance in it, assuming that some kind of disturbance is the sensible property of condition attributed by the concept. We could test this by investigating whether people would continue to assent to sincere utterances of L, like you have a pain in your toe, where we stipulate that there is no disturbance, but they continue to feel pain in their toe, as in well-defined so-called referred pain cases. Conversely, we could easily find out whether people would assent to L, whether there is the relevant kind of disturbance in their toe, but they don't feel any pain there. Yeah, so like if you got injured, but like you're not feeling any pain, then would the pain actually refer to anything? Because the injury is without the pain. Author says, there is not a shred of credible empirical evidence that people use proprietary pain concepts with labeling uses. I won't belabor this point at length. I just want to point out that if they were using concepts such, they would be treating a pain as a body part as one and the same as some physical disturbance in that part. They would be identifying pain and a disturbance in the strict sense. Yeah, so like you'd be talking about the injury and the pain as the same thing. As a matter of empirical fact, after reflection, nobody does that. Not a single figure in the history of medicine, not a single philosopher in the history of philosophy has identified bodily pains with objective bodily disturbance. As far as I know, the only relationship acknowledged between them is some kind of causation or correlation. Pain as fairly direct sign or indication of some disturbance. According to early thinkers, this correlation was very strong, but has become common sense in the last 50 years or so in pain science and clinical practice that the correlation is actually weak. In fact, it was the observation of this weak link that led to the big advances in pain science and clinical practice, as anyone familiar with the history of pain science in the 20th century would readily acknowledge. All right, so there's a bunch of footnotes there. But I think this is true because this is what's happened the last 50, 100 years. You know, there's ghost pains, there's things when you don't feel pain, other times when you should be feeling pain and you don't. So this is, this is a lot of hand waving on the part of the author, but I think they're generally in the right here. So that means when we say pain, we are not actually trying to label an experience with it. So the question is, what do we do now? All right. Author says, Adam Shriver and I have been collecting data about how pain scientists, clinicians, and other health professionals conceptualize attributes of pain to body parts in relation to physical stimuli. Since 2015, we've collected close to 300 anonymous responses to one or another version of a questionnaire. We have found no evidence whatsoever that they think pain is in a body part is one and the same thing as some physical disturbance in that part. On the contrary, they seem explicitly, quite self-reflectively, and vehemently opposed to making such an identification, as has been emphasized again and again in various versions of the IASP definition of pain science since 1979. Yeah, so, like I said, you guys can reflect on this yourself. You can pinch yourself. Where is the pain? You go pinch your hand. Where's the pain? Pinch yourself. Is the pain in your head or is it in the pinch exactly? You can, of course, not feel pain, and then it would be the pain then is somewhere else. MDD says, authors right, see the growing body of research in idiopathic pain disorders. Yeah, I don't know this literature, but I think the author's mainly right here. But again, you poke yourself, you can do other stuff. You can be where's the pain? And you can realize, sometimes you're in pain, sometimes you're not, but it's not the poke itself. The poke itself is not the pain. It's some reaction to the pain, or the poke caused the pain. It is not the pain itself. All right. Author says, what is more interesting is that even among recent philosophers of mind whose perceptualist or representationalist views should imply that the pain in a body part is some objective condition of that part, you might think it's like the firing of certain neurons in your hand. We don't find this identification. They generally handle the location of bodily pain as an intentional location represented in the experience. Pains are experiences that represent disturbances in bodily locations, bodily sensations, but the relevant purportedly proprietary concepts thereby deployed, for example, painy, hurts, pain there, etc., have mysteriously no labeling uses. Hence, these philosophers must be rejecting premise 1 without the slightest argument produced. I suspect even without realizing that this is what they are doing. Non-fungible turtle, what's up? Hello from USA. Hi, I'm in the USA too. We celebrate independence from tyranny. Yeah, fuck those British. Now we are freest country in the world with no angry people or mean people. Yeah, of course. There's no one angry in the United States, and we are freest in the world for the proprietary definition of free. Can I not? What? Do you not believe that we have the proprietarily freest country in the world for our definition of free? Okay. The author's point here is no one actually thinks pain is representing things in the world. which is interesting. So that even people who should be more careful about their definitions still don't say this. It's trademarked, exactly. Like we export freedom. No one else can export the freedom like the United States of America. We are the freedom exporters. That is our number one product to the world. And I'm very sorry about that, everyone else. Okay. So premise 2 of the you are argument. I always forget how people use you are, but it's like the ultimate reality argument, like that this is what the world is like, that there's some representation. So there's you are is like ultimate reality. I completely hate this lingo, but it's what people say. We trade freedom for oil? No, we do not trade freedom for oil. We provide freedom, and other people then, as a token of gratitude, provide us with their oil. We don't trade it. It's, this is what people give us for, providing them with freedom. Okay. So, yeah. Premise 2 of the you are argument is empirical and the evidence for it is decisive. Still, a reductive representationalist may concede the point, but suggest that we should be revisionist in about our thinking and pain language. We should strictly identify pain in a body part with some physical disturbance in that part, and should think and talk accordingly. Given the way basic and clinical pain science has been developing in the last 60 years or so, this will not happen. Furthermore, there is strong reason to believe that it cannot happen empirically. The revisionist claim comes close to claiming that we should change the way our cognitive architecture works. If the way we, as a matter of fact, in the streets, labs, or clinics, naturally cognitively resist identifying pain in a body part with an objective condition of that part, we should ask why. Why is it that, if nociception were strongly representational, we find an empirical pattern that is precisely opposite of what is predictive? Yeah, freedom TM, exactly, Tindarios. I mean, and none of the rest of you can use freedom like we use it, because it's our freedom, not your freedom. Yeah, this is a good question. Author's asking, if we actually have representational theories of mind, then why is it that we don't do it sometimes? And it doesn't look like we do it. So this is a good question. Now, it's an interesting tack in philosophy to say, look, no one actually does it this way. And we shouldn't be basing off our philosophy off some fantasy of how the world could be if no one does it that way. And this is a good point. It's like, what are we actually talking about? It's probably bad philosophy if you have to tell everyone in the world they're wrong. MDD says, well, maybe against the author's point, like, yes, the connection between physical realization and the experience of pain can be much looser than is traditionally implied. You obviously can't sever the connection completely. Like, if I have an abdominal pain, where exactly I tell the doctor the pain is located makes a difference in their diagnostic exploration, and said exploration is more effective for doing so. Yeah, that's right. You can't get rid of it entirely. But the problem is, it's more like a causal thing. That's what the author's arguing here, that at best, you have some sort of like, well, something's wrong in this area. That's not where something is causing the pain in that area. So something's wrong, but that's not what the pain is specifically either. Like, there's a disturbance in the area, but that's not the pain. It is causing me pain. So like, there's still a connection, but they're saying it's not a representationalist one. And I think that's it's good that you bring that up, MDD, because that drills down their point. Because they're talking about labeling uses. This is the whole point. If there is no representation there, what are we labeling? You're talking about the causal structure, but that's not like in reality. Luke says you can still sever the connection and still have proprioception, like phantom limb sensations. Yeah. And so this is like the last 100 years of pain science where people are starting to discuss this thing. So yeah. So, like, this is the issue. There are no, so we're not giving rise to concepts with labeling uses. That's the point, is that it's not a labeling use in terms of representational content. We're talking about causal structure, which is not what the representationalist wants, because the causal structure is sort of like some implied, well, something happened and this is a story I'm telling you about the world, not that we got information from the world and that's what is in our head. So that's what the argument is ultimately against. It's against the simplistic version of, okay, we just get information from our bodies in the world and that's what's in our head, this representation. No, the causal structure is, something a story we'd have to come up with. Yeah. Well, yes, that's exactly right, MD. That the causal structure is not the representation of the pain. It's a story about it. And so that's what they're saying, is that we don't really have a representation. And if we ask people, they don't think the pain exists only in the hand, like it's something else. Yeah. And so the author right here is arguing, should we force it back? Should you say, no. Is the causal structure, like the story about the pain, real in your hand? And then they say it's not quite clear what the wisdom of suggesting a revisionist approach would be except saving a philosophical dogma. Why would you force it back on the thing? So it's like MDD is like got a point there, but they're saying, look, don't force people to change how they talk about their pain. Like that is a fair argument. If you're saying this is what pain is, you have to take the phenomena of what people give you, because all we have is what we talk about. Now, if you had a scientific theory that showed that the pain was in your hand, then you could fall back to that, but we're talking about the linguistic data here. Okay. Author continues, besides, it isn't like we would be missing anything if we didn't identify pains with disturbances, but we already have all the necessary conceptual and linguistic apparatus to think and talk about disturbances and the like, in the streets, in the research labs, and clinics. Yeah, so you can talk about an injury in your hand. That's different from talking about the pain. Like, you could be injured but not feel it. That happens. Like, if you you get bad enough burnt, you can burn off the nerve endings. So you can be like, oh wow, my hand is like burnt, but you won't feel it anymore. It's one of the scary things about being burnt. Okay, if pain experiences were completely transparent to their owners about what they represent, we would have proprietary concepts of what they represent, but we don't have such concepts. Hence, pain experiences are not strongly representational. This is not to say that pain and other bodily experiences are completely devoid of any intentional features. Yeah, and here we go. They're trying to, they don't want to piss MDD off too badly. They know that people agree that pain in your hand, and this is how you tell people about it. Clearly, these experiences contain information about where in the body these sensations occur. Yeah, this is exactly it. Maybe along with their temporal features. Yeah. If bodily locations should be treated intentionally as somewhat denoted or referenced by the experience, then the main question is about whether the same experience attributes or predicates any sensible properties or qualities to that location. The main contention of this paper is that for there to be such an attribution, for there to be representational content with accuracy conditions, proprietary concepts are required. Yes, you have to be able to specify something about the location. That's premise 1. Premise 2 is the empirical claim that we don't have such concepts. Yeah, again, so where's the pain? You say it's in your hand, but then you'd be replicating the fact that you'd say your hand is injured, but that doesn't mean the exact same thing. So then you need some sort of concept that'd be like, okay, this is a specifically kind of pain that is represented in the hand. One might inquire that in our conceptual response, if we don't locate physical disturbances in having pain experiences, what do we locate, if anything? This is a good question, and the answer is not obvious. One might think that irrealist, non-reductive versions of strong representationalism may have a better chance at answering this question. In the remainder of this paper, I will rather briefly look at whether this is so. Yeah, so what is a pain actually then doing? What is it telling you? So if it's not a real representationalism, what is an irrealist representationalism? The version I'll develop will be a schematic, as there are various versions of this view, and none of them seem to have gained the status of canonical formulation. According to irrealist representationalism, the sensible qualities non-conceptually represented in sensory experiences are nowhere instantiated in the world in which the experiencer lives, not in the world and not in the experience. These qualities live only in the intentional content of the experiences. Sensory experiences represent these qualities as instantiated in the world, of course. Yeah, so we get a sense that it's in the world, but it's all in our head. Like intentional. Somehow we are just creating it. Sensory experiences represent these qualities as instantiated in the world, of course. So these experiences are always non-veridical. If my visual experience represents this ripe tomato ripe tomato is pure red, even under perfectly normal conditions. My visual experience is in error. The tomato is anything but pure red. Pure red, as given to me in my experience, is simply the kind of quality that cannot have instances in this world. We were talking about this at the beginning of stream. Nothing in the world is perfect. It's still like it doesn't make sense. So you're seeing shades, but like it's not pure red. I mean, that's normal. Even though no experience of color-sighted people can ever be veridical in this world, color experiences still represent these sui generis primitive qualities as instantiated. This view is sometimes called figurative projectivism, and like all projectivist views, it is an error theory. The sensible world as it is in itself is nothing like as it appears to me in my sensory experience, but because the error is systematic, it matters little for the success of my behavior as I negotiate my way in the world. Yeah, so everything's fucked, but we still sort of like get close enough. That's the error theory. So it's not pure red, but like it gets close enough to some sort of idea of pure red that we use pure red. What's up, Rethius? How are you? We're reading paper on how to describe pain experiences. Yeah. Defenders of irrealist strong representationalism tend to be non-reductivist about both experience and representation. Sensory experiences have their phenomenal character solely due to their representational content, sometimes called phenomenal content, which cannot be explained in purely non-representational, non-mental, and more broadly, naturalistic, physicalistic terms. So now we've just left physicalism. You hear that? Like, I know, yeah. Thank you for the follow. Individualistic as fuck. I love this paper. There you go. Subjectivist as fuck. I mean, yeah. So this is getting away from the strict sciencey sort of thing. So we're no longer in physicalistic terms or naturalistic, but this is the trouble with pain. How do you actually describe it? What's it describing in the world? And as they just argued, we can't describe pain as representing anything. So that means it's in our head, but then we've lost the purely physicalistic description of the pain. We don't know what it is. It's only pain to us in our experience. And what is that? This is a fascinating idea you've never considered? Yeah. Well, this is actually like, this has been an okay paper. Yeah. Like you might hear me complain about some of the things going on here, but like, frankly, it's not I don't think I've complained about this one too much. So this has been like, if you want to argue with this, you have to go back and be like, all right, what do you mean by representation at the beginning of the paper? Maybe there's some funky stuff there, and they had to do a little hand waving to get that argument set up, but they did a good job of at least making it look like, well, this is what the representationalists think. Now, maybe there's other kinds of representationalisms that are better than what they argued against, and so they'd be kind of strawmanning other representationalisms. Maybe there's a better one, but like this is trying to argue against the sort of like physicalist, representationalist, the strong representationalist, physicalist position. Yeah, I've only seen the last page, so there are probably errors. There's always errors, but like this is not doing that bad of a job. Okay. Partly because of this, it is harder to criticize them by pointing out that they are making a mystery out of an experience's representational powers. Yeah, so these people are just saying like, okay, we are not reducing this to any physical physical system. Okay, that's fine. People want the naturalism, but if they're not doing this, then you can't criticize them for how they're doing it. You just be like, well, I don't like it, but that's okay. You don't like this theory. Nevertheless, representationalism about sensory experiences doesn't come cheap, and we can run a version of the UR argument against them. Okay, so they're still calling it a representation. We're just not exactly sure. It's just a representation of our phenomenal experience. Yeah, exactly, MDD. The development of this argument goes way back, including Wittgenstein and Kripke. Yes, this is, this is literally Wittgenstein's bug in a box. This is the Wittgenstein, like he's got a beetle in a box, and this is the anti, like, what are you actually saying when you, saying, well, I have a beetle in a box but can't show you. That's the same thing as I have a pain, but you can't see it. I'm just telling you I have a pain. So this is the beetle in the box argument, just, updated. Why does he have a beetle in a box? He can't show it. It's an analogy. Imagine I have a beetle in a box, but I'm not going to show you. Like I have a beetle in my hand. I'm not showing you the beetle in my hand. Well, now imagine I have a pain in my hand. How is that different from saying I have a beetle in my hand and I can't show you, than I have a pain in my hand and I can't show you? No. Not anything like that. Nothing like that, Arethius. It's saying, imagine I have a pain, but I can't show you where the pain is, just like I had a beetle and I can't do it. So this is the exact same thing that, like, well, I'm not showing you, but, like, it makes no sense. So Wittgenstein would be very against the Joseph Smith Book of Mormon stuff, because that's the whole point, is that if you can't show it, where is it? Then it doesn't exist. It's not the same thing. But what do you say about pain then? And this is just a development of that argument. The Kripke-Levine explanatory gap. Yeah. So again, what are you trying to do in yeah, like I don't know the Kripke. I haven't read up on that enough. But this is basically, how do you explain what a pain is if I can't show you the pain? It's like saying I have a beetle in the box, but I can't show you the beetle. It's like, well, then how do I actually know you have a beetle in the box? I got God on my shelf, but I'm afraid to show you, otherwise you will steal him. Yeah. And also this, I think there's also the version of it's Russell's teapot, although I attribute it to Ramsey. So there's the Russell's teapot where it says, well, there's something so far out that I'm telling you it exists, but we can't see it. I mean, so this is another beetle in the box argument. Did I know the state of Missouri is the show me state? Yeah, it's the show me state. Yeah. I've heard that before. Missouri? Okay. Missouri. Okay, yeah, Missouri, show me state. So yeah, so this is the question. This argument here is a development because it's saying, well, can you even represent the pain as opposed to just people saying it? And so is it a representation of your phenomenal experience, like your qualia? And then they're developing the argument against this. Okay, so this is the argument against, let's see what I do over here. So this is the argument against representation even in experience level. Okay, for every sensory modality or submodality M that gives rise to conscious experience E in that modality, there's a set of low-level sensory qualities. So not property anymore. Now we're talking about sensory qualities. These are the qualia associated with M, such that E represents the qualities only if the experience is in the immediate epistemic basis for the acquisition and deployment of the proprietary concept of SQ. So yeah, you have an experience and then you have some qualia of that experience that is representing, and as I was saying on Ivan Neal's stream earlier, qualia is a bad idea. It always was. Okay, so yeah, can you have some experience of qualia? So definition star sees a proprietary concept of SQ if and only if. So it's a qualia, like the experience of having like the color orange or whatever. So C is needed for the explanation of how agent G, where C belongs to G set of mental representations, discriminates or learns to discriminate instances or quasi-instances of SQ. Yeah, so you see something and you're like, hey, orange. C is normally acquired from sensory experiences of the experience in that modality, and C has labeling uses in that they are non-inferentially, directly immediately applied by the person to the instance or quasi-instances of the qualia on the basis of the experience, thus generating a true or false de re. So about the experience now, not in the world. You're talking about the object of the experience, the qualia. Thoughts non-inferentially based on veridical or non-veridical sensory episodes. So this is interesting. You're de-raying your qualia, which is why qualia is a bad idea. This is a fucking weird metaphysics. The paper is now weirdly complex. Yeah, so they had to jump up to a metaphysical argument here to say, okay, we were talking about your direct experiences. Now, if the experiences aren't directly of the world, how does this work? And they're just rerunning the argument at the qualia level, at the experiential level, and they're going to say, well, it doesn't work there either. So the representationalism is out as a theory, because if it doesn't work in direct and it doesn't work for your at the experience level, your consciousness level, why bother with representationalism? So that's the strategy. It's not. This is clever. Like, this is a clever argument. I'll give this person some credit. You know, I think I've seen this author before too, which is interesting. I might want to look them up. I think I've seen them around. Like I've seen this author. Like, this is not they're not crappy. Okay, the rest of the argument. The rest of the argument is exactly the same, except the conclusion 5 is now about the strong irrepresentationalism of the irrealist variety. I will call the resulting argument against irrealist representationalism as such the extended UR argument. A quasi-instance of a sensory quality SQ represented in sensory experience is the instance of a sensible property SP that is normally the cause of experiences that non-conceptually represent SQ as instantiated. Yeah. So even if you have a in-between step, world where there's a property, then there's a quality that you are now representing by your pain or the color or whatever. Again, it doesn't matter. The middle step isn't saving anything because it's the same damn argument. Okay. All right, so they're going to explain it now. I hope they do it, well, hopefully they'll do it better than I did. This needs a bit of unpacking. Suppose you are an irrealist representationalist. You believe that the color of the ripe tomato in front of you that you see is not in fact instantiated on the surface of the tomato. This is the sensory quality, as given to you in your experience. It's an Edenic quality in Chalmers' terminology. Although it appears instantiated by the tomato, the experience is non-veridical. What is instantiated, in fact, by the tomato is a physical sensible property, something like a surface spectral reflection of a certain kind that is the normal cause of experiences that represent as instantiated the sensory quality, the Edenic quality, SQ. This quality, although represented as instantiated in the world, is not instantiated anywhere, not even in the sensory episode that you undergo that is the event of your sensorial representing the quality. Yeah, exactly. This is terrible. But this is all philosophy speak. But like I said, world, and now you have some sort of like you're generating a quality, and that's what you're representing. That's all it is. This is an intermediate step. Instead of the direct representation of the world, you have an intermediate step that your mind is doing something. But again, it doesn't matter because where you place the world, is it direct or is it in between? The argument's exactly the same. Okay, so these Edenic sensory qualities are not sensible qualities. You did not sense them. They're in your head. There are no instances of them. They cannot be instantiated in the world you live. No, they're in your head. So they cannot be sensed. They can only be represented as instantiated non-veridically, hence the new terminology. We will continue to refer to the real objective sensible properties instantiated in the world that are the normal causes of relevant sensory experiences as such as sensible properties. We will use the term sensory quality for those Edenic qualities directly representing an experience. Seems like complex we perceive but do not see. Yeah. Well, that's the problem exactly there. You have to have some sort of distinction between sight and perception. So perceive but do not see. So you have to do something funky there. Now, if you said that sentence in perceive but do not see in a different context, people would just be confused at what you said. They're like, what do you mean you perceive but do not see? Did you like think it up? So it's like you have to, they're just trying to put a step in between. That's it. But like, you have to do a lot of work to be like, well, you perceived it, but you did not see it. Well, how did you perceive it then? Context. We have eyes and they have to be processed by our brain. Yeah. But again, that is a very complex statement, really. Like where you're saying, well, the brain does processing. That's a very contemporary take on things. So it's not like a crazy thought. It's just there's a lot packed into that. Okay. Now, depending on the theorist, there will be different kinds of complicated relationships among the sensory experiences, the thoughts that these experiences will non-inferentially prompt, and the expressions of these thoughts in the natural language of the experiencer. Nevertheless, these theorists need to pay much more attention to how we, in fact, think about pains in the body and talk about them. It seems like common sense to me, but I'll accept that it is very modern. Well, of course, the idea that the brain is processing, the idea that the brain processes like a computer hasn't been around really since the idea of the computer, like in the modern sense, and since like the mid 1800s. So it's really, in terms of philosophy, a very recent idea that there is processing, that there is a process that's going on. Like the idea that there's like steps that you might, like an algorithm. These are all very contemporary thoughts. Now, there's nothing weird about them. But your eyes are useless without a head? Yeah, sure. But like the idea, like if you go back a few hundred years where we didn't really understand brain science, like the whole of modern history or human history up until like very recently, we didn't think of it as like processing because we didn't know how the brain worked. And so you wouldn't say something like that. But I mean, it's common sense now. So, but like, yeah, in the history of like theory of mind, it's not. It's pretty recent. Okay. Okay, so you are looking at a ripe tomato, and the following thought occurs to you. Ah, that's a lovely red. Where the that refers to the surface of the tomato. Let's stipulate that you have the following thought tokened in your mind immediately as a result of your visual experience. So the red is pointing to the that. You love this, Sarah? Yeah, I mean, we're doing pretty well at the moment. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the way science is going. So it's like, yeah, it's good. But you gotta remember, like I said, these are actually not new concepts. You can go back to Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster, Mary Shelley, mid 1800s. These ideas that you could put stuff together and there's a process, you could like build it there, and you could put like human life together. Like, this is not actually that clever. What I'm saying, this is like Mary Shelley knew this hundreds of years ago. It's like these ideas are contemporary, but they're not like cutting edge. Like, this was cutting edge hundreds of years ago. Brains do not compute. Yeah. So there's an argument about that too. So Tindarios may be right. Maybe this is the wrong way to think about brains. I'm kind of on the brains do not compute side. I mean, there is obviously computation going on in part of it, but like, what do they actually do? Now that gets into harder and harder philosophy of mind. But this is the point, is that there's now an argument about this. But like, Tindarios is right. There are people who disagree on these things. Okay. It's like, yeah, do brains compute? Like, what does it mean to compute? Rethia says, they blew my World War II vet grandpa's mind when they showed up at his house in 2006 after Philosophy 101. Huh? He got mad about it. Yeah. Well, who blew up your grandpa's mind about that? Got mad about it. Who knows? It's like, there are old ways of thinking about the world, and it's like, well, what are you actually getting out of the philosophy? You shouldn't just be using it to piss people off. The idea that sight is not actual reality. Yeah. It's like, don't tell people that like things that are obvious to them are wrong. That does piss them off. I mean, if you want to talk philosophy, cool, but like, you don't want to piss them off too much. He was like, what the fuck? You weren't trolling, yeah. It's like, what do you mean, like? Well, that's the question. It's like, what do you mean this isn't a pencil? What do you mean this isn't art? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, well, yeah, you're doing philosophy. It's like, you're not crazy. You're just asking weird questions about what actually is happening. Are we brains that compute, or are we not? Wait, what? Socrates taught you otherwise? Exactly. These are the questions. All right. So again, do you see a color and you're like, well, there's the color? Is that what's going on in your head? So this is a convenient notation depicting the format of your thought and its elements. The hashtag indicates the active development, in this case, labeling uses. So you're being like, this is orange, or that is red. If you're an irrealist representationalist, you have a few options about what to say regarding the truth value of this thought. So the hashtag read that attributes the Edenic sensory quality to the surface of the tomato and therefore is false. Yeah, so if you have the concept of red there that you're tripping into tomato, well, that's false, because the tomato is, it's a range of colors. Red that attributes the sensory property of red, of SSR red, and is therefore true on this occasion. So it's doing the thing that, like, whatever you think it is. Okay, so that's talking about the experience. Red then has two sets of truth conditions associated with it, strict and loose. Strictly is false, but loosely it is true. Strict truth conditions are usually applied in play in philosophical context. It is the loose truth conditions that apply pretty much everywhere else. Okay, so you're talking error theory, like it looks kind of red. That's what you meant by saying it was red. And then red also has a layered Neo-Phrygian content. Oh my god, what the fuck are we doing here? Its primary intention is something like primitive redness is instantiated there. This thought is always false in the actual world, but given the functional role of the underlying color experience, something like the normal cause of this experience representing the instantiation of primitive red is there. Red there is instantiated there. The experience and the thought may have different extensions in different worlds. Alright, no one else has to care about this, but like basically you're just lining up what your experience in the world is like. And so then you're talking about references, and then does the reference you're talking about point to true in this world or point to false, depending on what world you're in? No one needs to care about this. When evaluated in our world, this thought is true due to the tomato's SSR red causing your experience on this occasion. Causing your experience. So yeah, you are pointing to the true by labeling the redness of the tomato with what you call red. So yeah, SSR red being the normal cause red representing experience in the actual world. Yeah. Well, this is a semi-sophisticated way of going about how to refer to things in the world. Okay. C and D can be related by saying that D provides a more philosophically satisfying interpretation of C. What? Okay. So, yeah, so if you're going to go with D, that's the more sophisticated version of like saying you have a very specific way of referring to the world. Whatever. So much for the schematic representation of irrealistic representationalism. That there is a lot more to say, especially about how such thoughts are supposed to connect up with the standard truth values of utterances expressing these thoughts in public languages. But the above will be sufficient to run the extended your argument against the view. So what happens to John's thought prompted by this feeling of pain in his toe? Your toe is painy. That my toe is painy. That's what it is. Where that in the language is of his thinking refers to his toe where John feels the pain. Utterances is a weird word to use. Yeah, well, you have to do it in philosophy because you're matching up something with the world. And so what is it that you said? You had an utterance, and does the utterance match up with the world? With what did you say match up with the world? And this comes up in philosophy of language a lot. What is the utterance? And so like if you write something down, it's an inscription. It's not specifically the words, because the words can be reused many times. When you write stuff, that's an inscription. When you say something, it's an utterance. You're talking about the particular instance of it. So you have to get specific sometimes. So that utterance, this inscription, things like that. All right, so option A, when transferred to the case of pain, results in the wrong verdict. T is intuitively true. So you are talking about the pain that you feel. John may not have much of an idea about the truth makers of his thought, but just as John himself would insist, I am pretty sure that whatever this thought attributes to the toe, John's thought is true, so that your toe's in pain. Any view that implies that John's thought is in fact false, and therefore John doesn't have a pain in his toe, given empirical facts, therefore refutes itself. Yeah, so if he's saying I have a pain in my toe, there's no reason to think that it's false. So it's like, but that's the problem, people say that. So since you are referring to a pain, but that's not the pain's in your head, then you're saying, well, that's not what John said. Okay. So that's option A. Option B also results in the wrong verdict. As argued before, when we think of a pain in our body part, we don't ipso facto think of any objective condition of that body part like a disturbance. Painy doesn't attribute a sensible property. In fact, let us stipulate that John's toe has no disturbance of the relevant sort in his toe at all. So we've got a ghost pain now. The disturbance, say, is in his lower spine. Yeah, so we've got nerve pain somehow. John's pain is John's pain in his toe is now a referred pain. So his thought is still true. John correctly judges that he has a pain in his toe, even though that's not where the disturbance is. Okay. If options A and B result in the wrong verdict, then combining them will obviously not help. So option C is no good either. To see this, consider the case where he sincerely judges that he has a pain in his toe, even when there is no disturbance of the relevant kind in his toe. The empirical facts are such that people, pretty much everyone from common folk to scientists, clinicians, even philosophers, considers his belief to be true. Yeah, when I feel like I have a pain, I believe I have a pain. But option C gives the wrong verdict by requiring that John's belief is false. The response to the option D follows the same path. In a case where the pain is referred, for instance, John's thought turns out to be false across the board. Yeah, so if I'm thinking I have a pain in, like, sort of my thoughts, but then I'm trying to find the reference of where that pain goes, the fact that the pain is actually nerve pain from my back and not something busted in my toe, we're referring to the wrong thing in the world. Yuck. Okay. Now I'm sure, given their metaphysical resourcefulness, irrealist, non-reductive representationalists will find a way to resist this argument. Perhaps they will insist that option A gives us the right verdict. The Edenic painy quality is nowhere instantiated, let alone in body parts. So it's like you have the feeling of pain, but where is it? Still, it's falsely represented by the pain experience as so instantiated. Yeah, because you feel it in your hand, not in your senses. So whatever John may sincerely think deploying painy, directly prompted by his experience, he doesn't in fact have a pain in this toe. No sensory quality is instantiated in his toe. He is simply deluded in believing that he has a pain in his toe. Note that this is quite different from the case where John judges directly prompted by his searing red and deploying red that this tomato is red. Here, there is room for the irrealistic claim that John's thought is strictly speaking false. Edenic red is nowhere instantiated, but is loosely true due to the instantiation of SSR red on the tomato surface. So, there's a surface reflection of redness. If it turns out that the tomato is not in fact red, no SSR red, then it is not unreasonable to think that John's thought is in fact false, even loosely speaking. But no such room exists in the case of John's belief that he has a pain in his toe. Yeah, can I define why the paper is comparing tomato redness to pain? Yeah, because there's something in the world. And so you're saying, well, where is the pain? Where is the pain? Is it like the property in the world? And so they showed that if you're trying to do a direct thing in the world, that it fails. Where is the representation of it? How do you actually talk about that? They showed that earlier. Now they're trying to show, well, why is this a pain? Is pain worldly? No, that's what they're arguing. Well, they're arguing what is the representation of it. Now, pain, they're saying, look, if you're saying you have a representation of the pain, there's an anti-representationalist paper. So they're saying if you have a representationalist of it, well, no, it's not. So you can see how both are internal. Yeah, that's where we're going with this. That there's only sort of this mental intentionally thing of the pain. And just like the color in the world has to be non-representational, then pain also. And this is the beetle in the box. If I'm saying I have a beetle in a box and you can't see it, well, where is it? Well, if I'm saying I have a pain in my toe and I can't point to the damage, then where is it? It's in your head. And no matter how you try to fix the reference to put the pain in your toe, it doesn't work, because either you're talking about something in your head with like this sort of sense of pain, or there's some sort of busted thing in your toe, but you can never really match it up. And that's what's going on. And so the pain in your toe, or a color of a tomato, you can never match up your representation with your experience of it. Yeah. At this point, I can't do any better than giving the representationalist an incredulous look if they indeed insist that A gives us the right verdict. Having become pretty immune to incredulous looks, I don't, however, expect irrealist representationalists to be moved by that. The best move on their part, it seems to me, is to reject premise 1 of the extended UR argument on the grounds that some sensory experiences can represent certain sensory qualities, even though this representation never gives rise to labeling concepts, thus never generating relevant range of thoughts with truth conditions of any sort. We have concepts of these, yes, but they only allow us to think about these qualities in the abstract, so to speak, without these concepts ever getting applied to particulars, appearances notwithstanding. Yeah, so we're not actually applying anything to anything in the world, even if you think you are. These qualities are never instantiated anywhere in the world of the thinker after all. Yeah, see, they're tailored to the individual. So this is what's happening here. He's saying there's no representation. I'm on this side of the world too. I don't think what we're saying quite often has any representation on our head. We're trying to affect some change in the world. When I say I'm in pain, it basically quite often is be I need help. That's what you're saying. But I need help is very different from having a representation of pain in my foot. When I say I'm in pain, that means I need help. So, which is completely different, It's not a representation. It's like making a request. Okay, so these concepts in fact never get applied to particulars represented by the relevant sensory experiences, but this seems empirically false. Again, if you do this. Schizophrenic people have very unique experiences of pain. That's interesting. I don't know anything about that, but I'm not surprised, because again, how is it getting used and how is it getting processed by someone with a schizophrenia? Yeah, it's going to be different. Okay, it would make a bad joke in light of billions of people experiencing bodily pains in their daily routine, not to mention millions of chronic pain sufferers correctly thinking and reporting pains in their body parts. How could they be thinking about bodily pains in the abstract without judging that they have pains in the body parts? It is one thing to claim that these concepts are applied having labeling uses, but that they always generate false thoughts, as in option A. It's another to claim that they are, as a matter of fact, never in apparently labeling uses. They are merely to express what the content of their experience is. Besides, the very idea of an experience as a representation demands that it's the sort of thing that can be put in psychological, epistemological, behavioral use about what they represent. How is it that possible without these experiences giving rise to proprietary concepts? Yeah, so if you're always talking about something in their head, that makes no sense that, like, you're saying it actually has nothing to do with the world. Okay. A representationalist at this juncture is likely to realize that what they want to claim about the truth makers of tea, that John's toe instantiates the quality or property, is not that John's toe instantiates the quality or property, but that John's experiences represents the instantiation of a certain quality, property, and toe. So yeah, they're going at the experience level now. So they jumped up. The pain's not in my toe, but I'm experiencing pain in my toe. But a note that if any concept painy attributes the property of being an experience representing a sensory quality or sensible property, it is not a proprietary concept for the pain modality. Yeah, so now you're having a general experience. It's in fact an intentional property not attributed to the toe at all. It's the old concept of a pain experience implicating a toe, a pain sensation in the toe. When John judges tea, according to this proposal, he is making a self-attribution. I'm experiencing this quality as if it's in my toe. Yeah, so now you're in pain, and I locate the pain in my toe. So you have an experience. But now note that this quality does not refer to a pain in his toe, contrary to what John himself believes. Rather, it's supposed to refer to the apparent instantiation of the primitive sensory quality, not painy. Yeah, so you have an experience. That's different. But the reference fails, of course. It's a use of an empty mental demonstrative. Yeah, so I have an empty experience of pain, but what's it referring to? There are no instances of blah. There are no instances to be demonstrated according to irrealists. We are not only missing proprietary concepts for pain experiences to be representational as per premise 1, but under this proposal we are also burdened by the fact that the sensory quality John is claimed to be presented with in his experience is not in fact the pain quality he seems to be locating in his toe. So, flat out denying this premise won't solve the mystery of missing concepts for the irrealist. If painy attributes an intentional property, we don't seem to have a concept by which to express what sensory quality is represented in pain experiences, even if this concept is not a proprietary one. And worse, very counterintuitively, this represented quality turns out to be not the pain quality itself. Yeah, so if you have some sort of in-between step, how does it refer to the world, like your foot or whatever, and what is it actually experiencing then? You've got some other non-pain thing. It may be helpful to put the point a bit more precisely. On this proposal, T, when judged by John, functions as John's way of attributing the following inverse intentional property. My toe is being experienced by me as if it had this quality. So Paine attributes this property in John's thinking to his toe. But then, of course, this quality can't be purported to refer to what Paine refers to. The intended reference of this quality is the primitive sensory quality claimed to be sensorially represented in John's pain experience, but this quality is also claimed not to have any instances in the actual world. Pain, so it's again, always not in the actual world, it's in your head. Pain experiences being representational does, therefore, no good work on irrealist representationalism. I conclude that making pain experiences, along with the experiences of other similarly bodily sensations, strongly representational is a mistake. These experiences don't attribute any property or quality to body parts. But if pains are not strongly representational, then there are non-representational sensory experiences, but strong representationalism claims that all phenomenologically salient sensory experiences are strongly representational. We need to find new alternatives. Okay, that was a mouthful, but I want to point something out right here. This is the author of Pain in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. This author wrote the encyclopedia entry on pain. So basically, this is their field. They are an expert in like descriptions of philosophy and pain. So yeah, a bunch of references to themselves here. But anyway, what we do now is we review the paper. Here we go. As usual, if you are in chat, feel free to review. You use the emotes that you see in chat below. If you thought this was fun and gave you good ideas, you write out brain dance. And I apologize, you need to have correct spelling and capitalization. Nog Grapes for big claims that shriveled up. For Nog Navel for navel gazing only for academics. Nog Oro for Ouroboros deep or ancient ideas. Nog Stream for existential artistic drama. Like, there wasn't too much existential here. Nog Turd for all style no substance, still poop underneath. And Nog Knife, slicing and dicing arguments. And then there's the global vote yay and vote nay from Twitch. And also I have my vote meh. So, what do you think about this paper? This is gonna get a Nog Knife or two from me. This is definitely analytic philosophy. They made an argument, they like defended the premises, and then they expanded it like one more step to say you can't do representationalism this way, and then you can't do it the other way either. So they're gonna get 2 Nog Knives from that. It's gonna get a Nog Navel too, because, well, does this deserve the Nog Navel? I mean, it was against strong representationalism. I don't know how popular that idea is, but yeah. They're gonna get a navel, just because it's like, well, what is strong representationalism to like everyone else? I mean, most things can do that. But I actually thought this was a pretty good paper. Luke Rebels gave it a vote yay, a knife, and a few of those, yeah. So it's like, I'm also gonna give it a vote yay. Like, if you want to read something in this area, this is not bad. Like, this is not a bad paper. Like, this is, like I said, this is the encyclopedia entry author. So this is something. Tindarius, thank you. You missed on the knife, but I can fix that later if you don't fix it yourself. MDD says there's so much depth to the components domains being invoked in the paper is very deceptive in how approachable is in your opinion. Well, that's the trick. You make it look easy. I don't mean deceptive in terms of author's intent, but rather it's easy to walk away with the conclusion that it totally misses the depth of the landscape of this argument situated. That's being said, it's a good paper. Yeah. So like they focused on one argument that like it's kind of narrow about the strong representationalism, and they kind of circled around that. And so you're 100% right that you can't tell like how complicated it is because they were kind of laser focused. That's why this is analytic philosophy. I gave them 2 knives because this is a sort of laser focused on this one thing, and there's a lot of shit going on. There's a lot of footnotes on this, and so, but like you're right, they really made it like not that bad in terms of getting into it. So even when they switched over to the irrealist representationalism, I mean, as good a job as you can do on this. So yeah, thank you for the rating, MDD and Tindarius. Yeah, so I mean, if you want to talk about an argument against like this sort of realist, physicalist, naturalistic argument, this is one way to go. There are other ways to do naturalism, but this is, I think, why this is a good paper, is because I think this is against the naive sort of physicalist, well, what you feel is just a representation in your head. This is an argument against that, and that is just an argument against the naive naturalism. So I think that's one of the strengths of this paper, is that like the sort of naive naturalism is going to fail to this sort of very sophisticated argument, showing that it just can't be an easy representation.